Go in a second, just give another minute or so for people to come in. Okay, what do you say? I think we could get going right now. Hi, my name is Mark Goldstein, and I am chairman of UCSF Health Hub. And on behalf of Med Tech Innovator and Daniel Kraft and the rest of UCSF, we welcome you to our third in our series of what we call Hospital to Home. And Hospital to Home is a series of webinars that are about social distancing and how COVID accelerated the move into remote diagnostics and into telehealth. Today we have Laura, who's going to do, produced a really great presentation to kick everything off, and you will not be disappointed. Actually the opposite, it's really a great presentation. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna give a little background of UCSF Health Hub, what we're doing, and then we're going to move right into our agenda. We're we respect everyone's time. At this point, we're all getting really sick of Zoom. And so we really want to keep this to about an hour. Maybe we'll go a bit over an hour, but this is what we found this really works. Again, this series is the third. We're going to be focusing on cancer and basically what's happened and how basically everything in the oncology world and how what COVID has done and as it relates to telehealth and remote patient monitoring and more. Our next episode is going to be on orthopedics, where Stefano Bini is going to be our guest speaker, and he's going to talk about how the world of orthopedics has basically turned upside down. 2 weeks ago, we talked about cardiology, and we kicked it off talking about sort of COVID in general. Today, the four of us that are our speakers and moderators include Ralph Gonzalez, who you'll hear from, Dan Kraft, and Paul Grand. And our speakers are Laura Crescido, who basically is the Vice President, Chief Medical Officer at UCSF Health. And we have three amazing companies and their leaders joining us, Kareem, Corey, and Eric. And then we're also going to give time to all of you to get to meet these CEOs and these leaders of these companies to find out more about their solutions and why we picked them. So that's really how we're going to start. I'm going to take a step back and talk about UCSF. I imagine most of you know about all the innovation and the great things going on at UCSF. On top of being the top hospital system on the West Coast, it's really see UCSF as the center for healthcare innovation worldwide. More public NIH grants flow to UCSF, more innovation goes on around the Mission Bay and around the UCSF campus than anywhere else in the world. We think 40% of digital health innovation really starts within 15 miles of our campus. There's no shortage of startups and on campus and right off of campus. Health Hub is one of the innovation groups at UCSF, and we are really our role at Health Hub is to connect UCSF with great companies, with great advisors, with people in what we call in the healthcare ecosystem that might be clinicians or professors at UCSF. They might be venture capitalists, they might be advisors, they might be former entrepreneurs, whatever they might be. We bring everyone together. We call it our vision at UCSF Health Hub is to connect healthcare visionaries. We have a number of programs. We've had a program around COVID called the UCSF Volunteer Patriots, where we connected folks within our ecosystem to companies that were starting COVID-based solutions. We are producing our second annual UCSF Digital Health Awards. Our grand finale is September 23rd. And if you did not attend last year, it was in Mission Bay. This year it's online, so there's no excuse. We expect over 1,000 companies to be applying this year for our categories, and we really see this to be we're thinking increasingly of ourselves as the Academy Awards of Digital Health. Getting back to other things that we do here at UCSF and at Health Hub, we have tons of different events. And we're really excited about today's event. And with no ado, I'm going to basically introduce Ralph Gonzales right now. Ralph is the Chief Innovation Officer. He's going to talk about some of what's going on at UCSF. He knows Laura. He's going to make that introduction. And hopefully, don't be shy. We have a chat. We put your questions up to chat. We have a lot of time here today. We have 2 or 3 things going on. Each company is going to be making a 4-minute presentation on themselves after Laura's presentation, after Daniel Kraft's presentation, after Paul Grand's presentation. Then we're all there's going to be a breakout room, and then we're all going to come back and summarize. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Ralph.
Thanks, Mark. And it's a pleasure to introduce Laura Cedar, President and the
Uh-oh, Ralph, we're cutting you off. West Virginia is killing you. Ralph is in West Virginia, and as you know, internet in West Virginia is not what it is here. Oh, there he is. Are you ready? You back? Okay.
Am I back? Okay, I'll try one more time. So Laura is the Vice President, and this keeps me. All right.
We can.
I can take it. You want me to take it?
All right, Ralph.
Let me turn off. Here, I'll stop my video and I'll try one more time.
All right.
So Laura is our Vice President and Chief Medical Officer for Cancer Services at UCSF Health and the Helen Diller Family Comprehensive Cancer Center. She's been with us since 2018, where we were thrilled to recruit her from the City of Hope National Medical Center, where she had spent 20 years working in urologic and oncologic cancer care services. And most recently, before coming to us, was the Medical Director of Enterprise Quality and Safety. I don't think there's anyone better at UCSF to introduce this session as Laura, who's been really leading our care transformation in the Cancer Center in a variety of different ways, and has just launched our new 275 medicine cancer building. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura. Thanks again, guest speaker.
Hello, everybody. And let me just see if I can share my screen. Are you seeing that? Okay. So welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us. As a little background, cancer overall, it was estimated to be about 1.8 million new cases of cancer in the United States for 2020. And as you can see from this slide, the 2 top cancers in men are prostate and lung, and in women, breast and lung. In addition, it's estimated that we would see about 600,000 cancer deaths in the United States, again, split between pretty much the top 2 for men, prostate and lung, and breast and lung in women. At UCSF in the Helen Diller Family Comprehensive Cancer Center, we have 150 clinic visits per year of cancer patients visiting our facilities. And as Ralph alluded to, we opened a brand new building this year. We perform about 8,000 cancer surgeries per year. We do 80 to 90,000 infusion visits per year, and this is for chemotherapy infusions. And we see nearly 5,000 radiation oncology visits per year. When COVID-19 hit, we had to really rethink how we do cancer care. How do we take care of patients in a time where we also had to be very concerned about how do we take care of potential COVID patients? And so what we did was quickly put into place ways to provide safe care for everybody. We stopped most of our elective surgeries. We began doing video visits in any cases that were possible. And this was really to provide safe care for our patients. So if we could keep patients home and isolated as much as possible, but still provide the care they needed through video, that was our goal. We were able to convert about 70% of our visits actually to video visits. Screening exams were delayed. Radiology exams were delayed. Colonoscopies were delayed. We saw across the state and across the country that many private practices closed down and were unable to actually provide care for just routine care for patients because they didn't have the protective equipment that they needed. At UCSF, we implemented quickly many safety policies and procedures to make sure that patients who had to come into our facilities were safe. And this included masking of everybody, hand gel for everybody, screening of anybody that enters our buildings prior to entering the building, limiting our visitors, putting into place social distancing measures. And through it all, though, we did continue to do urgent care on site. And this is just a graph that shows that prior to COVID, what this graph is looking at is our in-person and remote visits. And you can see our kind of baseline prior to COVID. And what you can see on the top line is that we had a significant decrease in the absolute volume overall. And so many patient visits were delayed or postponed during this time. You also can see in green a shift to video or remote visits. Yellow is our telephone visits, the green is by telehealth. And so at one point we were almost at 70% of all of our visits were being performed remotely. This has come down a little bit. June and July numbers are really, or July and August rather, numbers are too soon to tell. I expect they'll be closer to our baseline. You can see now though in June, we're still about 50% of our visits are being performed remotely. One striking thing that we saw is we saw a significant decrease in our visit volume overall. This is recovered for our follow-up visits, but if you look at our new patient visits, they're down, and our referral pipeline is significantly down because I think a lot of community providers are still not back in their offices yet. So patients have not been able to come in for care to get the diagnosis and then be referred. One thing that we did see is that this is looking at fiscal year 19 and 20, and you can see that our patient experience significantly improved with video visits. So patients really liked video visits, at least in the short term. We'll see if this pans out in the long term. But I think that being able to have the visit in the comfort of their home, if appropriate, not have to travel to the city, avoid parking, lots of pluses. Also, they could be with their loved ones and have them share in the visit as well. So it seemed to be a very positive experience for our patients. So what were the effects of COVID-19 on cancer, and how is this going to affect us in the long term? So what we know is that many screening exams were delayed or postponed. Follow-up for suspicious findings on screening exams were also delayed because, as I stated previously, many community providers had to close their offices, so patients couldn't come in for that follow-up care. Also, patients were concerned about going in for care, and so many patients elected not to go in when normally they would quickly call their providers and be seen. So treatments were delayed, and this is likely going to lead to increased mortality. There was deferred care. We postponed any surgeries that were not urgent. In some cases, radiation treatment was postponed. Rarely, but in some cases, chemotherapy was postponed. As you know, cancer patients were highly susceptible to significant morbidity and mortality or poor outcomes if they got COVID. They're one of our high-risk groups in addition to the elderly. So patients were concerned, and if they didn't want to become immunocompromised or more susceptible to a bad outcome if they had gotten COVID. In many cases, we came up with actually very novel and creative ways to modify treatment in order to care for our patients more at home and keep them home and safe. And this would include using less intense chemotherapy. We used oral agents instead of IV infusions, if at all possible. And in some cases, we were able to give neoadjuvant or chemotherapy prior to surgery so that we could delay the surgical care. What we've also seen as a result of COVID is that many people lost their insurance. And because of that, that's changing how they're going to access care going forward. So one thing we know, though, is that just because people did not come in to get diagnosed or evaluated for cancer doesn't mean that cancer stopped all of a sudden. It continued, and patients were still getting it and developing it during this time period. There have been some estimates, and it's really kind of early to be able to see what the long-term outcomes of this delay in care are going to be. But there are estimates that we may have missed or delayed the diagnosis of maybe 10,000 or more cancers. And if we look at breast, prostate, colorectal, the top 5, just in 3 months, this is the volume of cancers that have either been missed or delayed in being detected. What we know is that if cancer is caught early, we have the best chance for cure. So if we have a delayed diagnosis, that leads to treatment for cancers that may be at a later stage. And ultimately, what's been modeled is we believe that we're going to have excess mortality related to that. And this doesn't look like a lot, 1%, but that will actually become a significant amount over time. And it looks like the effects are going to be seen for many years in the future. So how do we do this better? What do we do if we get a second surge? And in California, we're certainly feeling that second surge right now. So how can we do this better so that we don't have to stop cancer care, that we can continue to provide good care for our patients, even in situations like this? We can either go back to the way we traditionally did it, but I think everybody would agree that we can do better and that there may be more novel ways to go forward, or we can wait for the government to tell us how to do it. And I think, again, we would all agree that it's probably better if we can think of how to go forward ourselves. And I think we have a lot more creative ideas. So what are some of the things that worked that we should continue? We can say that telehealth was really great. It took us quite a while in the past prior to COVID to get buy-in for telehealth and video visits. And we were at about 3 to 5% of all visits were telehealth. And we had tried to promote it in our institution, but didn't really have buy-in. And that has to do for many reasons, including the reimbursement, which was really non-existent until COVID hit. And then we had a rapid adoption of this by providers as well as payers. So I think that's here to stay. We just have to figure out the right balance. Social distancing, we were able to limit the number of people coming into our facilities, making sure that only those people who need to be here came in, limiting the number of patients and visitors. We've reconfigured all of our areas so that it provides for adequate social distancing and safe care for patients that need to come into our facilities. We have segregated out where the COVID patients are being treated. We have protective screens. We also implemented, and Ralph's been great about this, our digital screening for staff, patients, visitors, providers, and vendors, so we can screen for symptoms of COVID prior to entering our facilities. Some areas that we still could leverage, and looking towards the future, what can we do better? I would say that maybe we need to look at how can we improve tests for home diagnosis of cancer. And there's things that are out there, but we didn't really leverage that during this first wave. So looking at circulating tumor cells or tests for patients who might be neutropenic while they're on chemotherapy, et cetera. Increasing the use of oral therapy, we did that a little bit, but if we could switch to more oral therapy that's effective, that keeps patients in the home. Using data and predictive analytics to determine who should come in and when they should come in, and maybe to do closer monitoring of patients who are at high risk either for developing cancer or for developing side effects from treatments. Using wearables to monitor our patients. Those are available now, but what we don't have is a way to take that data and integrate it into the electronic health record and to make it usable for providers, and a way to monitor that data and act on it 24/7. Virtual reality, one of the things that we know is that many of our residents had to stay home once COVID hit in order to limit the number of people in our facilities, but we still need to train doctors who need to come out and care for patients. And so their training can't be interrupted. Even 3 months is a significant amount of time. So maybe we could use virtual reality or find better ways to integrate them so their training continues. Many home health agencies had to stop seeing patients in the home because they didn't have the appropriate protective equipment, which was in short supply. So using virtual reality for things like home physical therapy might help us with our patients who need to recover at home. Virtual tumor board, CME, we've been able to open up our conferences to people across the country to help spread. We have many experts at UCSF that led the way in terms of how to care for and treat COVID patients, what practices to put into place to keep everybody safe, using virtual tumor boards to discuss how to treat these patients, cancer patients during this time. Use of digital pathology and imaging would allow us to share records between people or between facilities. Patient-reported outcomes, using the same digital technology that we use for screening to monitor patients for symptoms at home in between visits, so that we can make sure that we know if they have any symptoms, can we catch them early and then mitigate them. Again, integrating this all into the electronic health record, making it seamless, as many of these technologies are outside the electronic health record. Dashboards, we developed some dashboards to monitor data and be able to act in real time. And so using that to be able to manage our patients in real time. And then I'll stop there because I think we have some exciting talks ahead of us that can give us some good ideas about how to go forward.
Oh, excellent. Absolutely excellent. Thank you.
Yes.
Daniel?
Okay, I think I'm up next to everybody. I'm Daniel Kraft. I'm actually a pediatric oncologist and was an attending for several years at UCSf in pediatric bone marrow transplantation, and like to think about how do we take a lot of these technologies in this increasingly connected age and make them useful, particularly in the field of oncology. So, and as our theme here is going from hospital to home. Laura already mentioned the fact that the delays in cancer care are likely to result in tens of thousands, actually, extra deaths. You can just see some of the data from UCSF here in detail, the drop in the screening colonoscopies and beyond. And that's for many diseases that are often chronic. We can tell from people's cell phone data how hospital traffic went down dramatically in April. So I think we're well aware of the challenges now of things that have been lost in our ability to contact and connect with patients as a need for screening and for therapy. But we do have a lot of these new tools and technologies that are potentially enabling us and accelerating our ability to change how we do healthcare, particularly in the virtual connected era. And a lot of that is in somewhat thanks to the COVID crisis. And the challenge is then to not treat cancer in the same old ways, to use some of these tools and mindsets moving forward, to get out of the mindset of siloed healthcare divisions, maybe even body parts, particularly as cancer is more of a genetic disease. And again, the theme of this series that we're moving increasingly from the hospital to the home, to our phone, to hospital to hospital, where more and more care from infusions that used to require inpatient or outpatient visits can be done in our own homes. To reboot on some of our prior sessions, I think about the meta theme here is that we can move more into the healthcare realm from sick care, taking more of the often intermittent and episodic data that leads to our reactive sick care mode, where you wait for the patient to show up with a heart attack or a stroke or often late stage cancer, and to leverage that to be much more continuous with our data, more proactive, more personalized, and to bring that kind of care anywhere, anytime. Big issues around health equity and access have been amplified in the COVID crisis. And particularly in the oncology world, and on the proactive side, can we detect diseases at early stage 1 or stage 0, where the opportunity to cure and lower all the morbidities and mortalities associated are most present. We do in cancer and beyond, we're still mostly treating with big gun chemotherapy agents. A lot of drugs aren't even particularly effective for many patients. We have a huge opportunity in precision oncology, a whole other topic, but certainly ties into digital health and data to improve that element. It's quite disruptive to many biopharma companies, but tons of opportunity. We're seeing that in immuno-oncology and beyond. So in this new connected age, we can take some of the tools that are here now and what are coming to cross the healthcare paradigm, from the prevention, the diagnostics, therapy, to clinical trials. I'll try and cover a few of them. A lot of them, of course, are leveraging fast-moving technologies. Many of them can ride on our Internet of Medical Things, which is soon riding 5G and is certainly enabling virtualized care. I think still the meta theme across much of this is not just to have more data, but to turn that into actionable information and then narrow the gap on learnings from UCSF and how to manage, whether it's COVID screening or remote care on different protocols, to bring that to clinical utility much faster, and not just to have that in the UCSF system, but across all the UCs and then across medical centers and clinics across the country and the planet. So the incentives are changing with this new connected era, from hospital to home to phone to even inside our bodies. Often that's relegated to the bucket of digital or connected or mobile health. Clearly starting to come to oncology, but a bit behind other fields, is the ability to take these data sources and truly amplify them and individualize them, both for the clinician healthcare systems and the individual patient and their families and caregivers. We are now at this convergence of new fields that are emerging from digiceuticals to AI-driven diagnostics, which we'll touch upon in a minute. First off, we can do some smart things in the prevention and detection field using these technologies. So clearly, our wearables now, and we've only been in this Fitbit era for 11 years, can now pick up almost every element of physiology and behavior. And there are some pretty interesting projects from Verily to academic groups looking at wearables that may pick up with nanotechnology and beyond circulating tumor cells, a variety of interesting examples of that, still in very early prototype modes, but we may have a version of a wearable circulating tumor cell detector for someone who's already diagnosed, for example, to monitor their course of therapy. We can take, again, a simple wearable today like a Fitbit, and it's been used now to look at risk stratification, outcomes in cancer patients. How much are they moving? Can you identify the high risk and those less likely to survive and intervene differently? And the potential here is, again, beyond the Fitbit, but to the home lab, to the Internet of Medical Things, to go from the quantify itself, where that's usually siloed on the phone of the patient, and increasingly connect it to the provider, the oncologist, the nurse, the healthcare system, to leverage that for diagnostics, therapy, and prevention. There's a whole new realm of other ways of thinking about diagnostics and wearables, from breathables. The molecules in breath have been shown to be diagnostic for things like lung cancer, maybe colon and prostate. There are dogs you've heard of that can be trained to sniff out cancer. That's coming along. Ingestibles, small little robotic pills that can move through your GI system, and obviously both do imaging and potentially therapeutics. There are wearables in the realm of bras that have been tuned to pick up signs of early breast cancer, a whole set of those technologies that are spitting out in a variety of companies. And bottom line is, we start to take all these signals. It could be from your wearable, your sleep patterns. We're going to start to integrate what I always like to call the check engine light for the body, or the OnStar for the body, to give us that sort of early warning light, synthesizing many data streams to make sense of that. And there's several examples, work at Stanford and beyond, of that check engine light, whether it's for infectious disease, COVID, diabetes, or potentially cancer, to kind of, again, pick up all those signals and find disease at stage 0. And the opportunity is to take that data as we learn it and share it, build that sort of hive mind. Like a Tesla car, when it learns it needs to change its speed on a ramp, it'll update the maps for all the Teslas through the cloud. Saving that information, engaging citizens as data donors, I think is all part of this moving forward. An interesting element, and Laura mentioned this, I was a resident with Ethan Bash at Mass General. He's been a pioneer of using patient-reported outcomes. The fact that just collecting data about how someone is doing remotely, again, data outside of the 4 walls, is incredibly useful, and has been demonstrated, at least in several trials, to enable those who report to live 5 months longer. Those with metastatic, I'm not sure which metastatic cancer that was, but several examples of this being quite useful. And again, getting that data early proactively is helpful. And then, of course, engaging health is social, platforms where individuals can find other patients like them, other caregivers, glean lots of things that have been lessons learned. Instead of repeating and making the same mistakes, can lower stress levels and accelerate the paths for many patients and their families. Virtual reality, of course, can be fun for gaming. It can be good for physical therapy. It can treat pain. It can be used to keep someone relaxed when they're stuck in an oncology unit getting an infusion, or a bone marrow transplant unit. They can be at the beach. All those have many exploding applications, including, of course, in medical education and training, whether that's to train for surgery or more complex group care. Then, of course, a lot of cancers related to diagnostics, particularly earlier and earlier molecular diagnostics. Some of that, of course, relates to imaging. I was scanned about a year ago up in Vancouver by this startup called Pernuvo. Less than an hour on the scanner, full body MRI. Of course, that's not practical or affordable for most folks, but we are seeing the ability to now do imaging much faster and less expensively, augmented with AI machine learning, will potentially give us the ability to get scanned in 10 minutes for $1,000 every year at a price point that is reasonable. And we are seeing examples of these sort of imaging systems like Hyperfine, that is just rolling out to market now, that are 20 times lower price of normal. And of course, for us as clinicians or as home caregivers, we now have a whole new suite of digital diagnostic devices. A lot of those can be used to measure and monitor the chronically ill. Someone who's on chemotherapy, particularly if they're neutropenic, has a lot of other risk factors. Those might be detected in much more connected ways. Of course, the challenge is still connecting that within the workflow of the care team, so it's useful, not just data. lots of devices out there, from connected stethoscopes to ultrasound devices that can be used, again, to diagnose a tumor and pick it up early anywhere on the planet. A lot of time as oncologists we spend in managing fever and neutropenia. We don't often know what the patient's white count is. There's several startups building home point of care diagnostics. Just prick your finger and get your white count at home. That could be a super useful tool, an example of many home-based lab tests that are exploding on the scene. And of course, then labs can arrive in the mail, whether it's Cologuard, Color, or others for things like colon screening. So whole new industries are moving in that direction. And where we need to go with all this, inspired by the Cancer Moonshot and beyond, are really to get to very rapid, accurate, and affordable screening tests to pick up cancer early, when early detection can make a big difference. And we'll hear from Grail later in this hour as a great example of a company really moving in that direction. And omics, of course, is an underlying element in our risk for disease, the price of sequencing coming down to probably soon less than $100. What do we do with that information as clinicians, as individuals? I think we're going to start to see this integration of polygenic risk scores to really much more highly tune our cancer risk, so that not everyone gets their first colonoscopy at age 50, maybe age 20 or age 70, et cetera. And many examples you're aware of with BRCA and beyond, but that's going to get much more complex and useful. And then finally, of course, other omics can play a role. Our microbiome plays a role in our risk for GI cancers, as well as how we even respond to certain immunotherapies. So all the omics can be integrated here. The trick, of course, as we talked about in prior sessions, is how do we make sense of that as clinicians or as researchers or as healthcare systems? How do we leverage AI, not to compete with the pathologist, because deep learning can already diagnose better than most pathologists, whether that's for pathology or to augment your colonoscopies using AI machine learning to pick up the polyp that may have been missed, or to better classify it. To build those digital twins that synthesize this information to enable us to be truly proactive and personalized. And then, as was mentioned earlier, in our tumor boards of today and the near future, to synthesize all that information to truly find the right clinical trials that might be available, the best sort of crowdsourced, real-time, just-in-time information to apply going forward. And many elements coming in AI and drug discovery as well. Finally, in therapy, lots of excitement, but some of it could be basic. How do we take these complex pumps that require, a nurse and simplify them for home use? So again, hospital home is going to need smarter, more connected infusion pumps and other elements. We're seeing wearable devices like the Optune for patients with glioblastoma. It works by providing a continuous electrical field that's been shown to inhibit tumor division. And while it's not a complete game changer, survival at 5 years has gone from 5 to 13% compared to chemotherapy alone. So it's an example of something a bit out of the box that seems to play a role as a bit of a wearable therapeutic for cancer patients with brain tumors. And then of course, drug delivery. Again, we want to get that out of the infusion unit. Several interesting plays for biologics and potentially chemotherapeutic agents. Instead of the IV or infusion, you swallow the pill. This is out of Rainy Technologies out of the East Bay here in San Francisco area. And this pill will then, still in trials, but inject the biologic or immunotherapy directly into your gut wall, and it'd be something you can do at home that would today require coming into the clinic. So an example of interesting therapeutics. Digiceuticals are, of course, are here already for many elements. There are apps that have already been developed specifically for patient-reported outcomes that are being adopted by big pharma and others. There's a whole number of apps for that for cancer, whether it's for chemo brain, for patient, for clinician, for caregiver. And given that there's so much out there, I've been building a new website, Digital.Health, as a place to start to curate the apps, devices, the solutions that might be for cardiology, oncology, and beyond, and have them prescribable. Last point, of course, we need to accelerate clinical trials. Too little of cancer patients, particularly on the adult side, are seen and in trials. We can now democratize that through mobile devices. Trials are being done in virtualized ways in many ways, and we've seen smart platforms emerge like Science 37 that are really catalyzing that in oncology and beyond to really, I think, speed up the development of smart therapeutics, whether that's a drug, a digiceutical, a device, a wearable, or beyond. So with that, I think it's an exciting time. Again, part of the future of hospital, home, and cancer care is this kind of crowdsourcing of data, building better maps like the Waze or Google Maps for cancer care, where you can see other patients who've been on journeys like yours or patients like yours and make sense of that in real time. It's all this convergence of everything from wearables, big data, omics, Internet of Medical Things to VR that are really gonna, when we put them together in smart ways, bring us and accelerate us into a better future for oncology and healthcare in general. And COVID in its own ways is helping accelerate that across the spectrum. So with that, thanks, and I'll hand it over to Paul Grand. We're gonna hear from some pretty exciting startups in space. Thanks.
Excellent.
Daniel. Terrific presentation as always. Anytime you want to learn about everything that's happening in healthcare, just turn to Daniel Kraft and he will tell you. And I reinforce what he said about that Digital.Health, fantastic resource for anyone who's looking at what's coming down the pipe, what's available. Digital.Health is the place to go. So thanks. I'm Paul Grand. I'm the CEO at Med Tech Innovator. We're an accelerator for medical technology. I myself, background was an entrepreneur in MedTech, biopharma, and tech, then venture capitalist for 12 years. And for the last 8 years, I've been running Med Tech Innovator first as a program within the venture firm that I was at. And for the last little over 5 years, it's been now as a standalone company, just running Med Tech Innovator. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the things that are coming down the pipe in cancer care. Let me share my screen and again, give you a little quick context. So again, Paul Grand, CEO of Med Tech Innovator. You can see my contact information in the corner, Paul at medtechinnovator.org if you want to reach out to me. Again, for background, as I mentioned, we're an accelerator. At this point, we've looked at a little over 4,000 companies since we started. We've brought 258 of those into our programs. 54 products are now in the market, and $1.7 billion in follow-on funding has been raised by the companies that have been through Med Tech Innovator. You're looking at the graduating class of 2019 there on the slide, along with the products that the alumni before them have brought to the market. And our mission is simply to improve the lives of patients by accelerating the growth of companies transforming healthcare. So that's our entire focus. I thought it might be interesting today to look at some of the data from our applications. So out of the last 3 years, I pulled some of the stats specifically on oncology applications to Med Tech Innovator. So I'm going to break it down for you quickly here. So first of all, just kind of giving you a level set for how these broke out. 250 of the companies identified themselves as being digital technologies. So 56% of the applications that we looked at in oncology were digital. Out of those, 38% of them are already approved or are on the market at the time they applied to Med Tech Innovator. So although we have plenty of things that are coming down the pipe, there was also a lot of these that are already on the market or close to being on the market. And if you look kind of as a breakdown of where these fell in terms of themes, I'll let this sit up for about 30 seconds here so you can take a look at it. But in terms of the area that we're talking about today, remote patient monitoring was about 25%, almost exactly, 111 applications out of 443 in oncology were for remote patient monitoring technologies. You can see that sits at about the middle of the pack in terms of where things fell thematically, with things like precision medicine being about half of the applications, efficiency, improvements being a little more than that. So remote patient monitoring, big focus on in terms of innovation. In terms of diagnostics, this is kind of where things fall. So if you're in the diagnostic area, you might find it interesting that 25% of the applications were also in the area of point of care. And that's obviously the big trend that we're certainly seeing. And then finally, in terms of digital technologies, we broke down these by category. So again, you can see here, they go from the top. Again, about half the applications had artificial intelligence and machine learning involved in some way. 198 of them had big data analytics involved. 179 were in the health IT space. 27% of these were involved in telemedicine, so 121 applications. 40% of them were in mobile. So when you look at the future of what's happening in oncology care, at least as Med Tech Innovator applications as a proxy, we have 40% of the applications are in areas of mobile and the rest are smaller. So that gives you a little bit of a breakdown of kind of where things are coming in the pipeline. It's something that I think we like to take a look at and monitor. If we look at just this year alone, we had 1,000 applications, and actually there's been an increase in mobile. There's been an increase in other areas like remote patient monitoring. So it's actually taking a bigger share of the innovation pipeline. So that's a little bit of a snapshot of what's coming. We want to talk today about companies that are validated, companies that are actually out there on the market, that have been there in the trenches, and that have some stories to share with you. So we've got 3 that we're going to be focusing on today. They're each going to give you a short presentation, and then you're going to have a chance to spend some time with them in breakout sessions. So the companies that we have today for you are Mendel, Catalia Health, and Grail. I'm going to let Kareem introduce himself and tell you about their company and give you a short presentation. We're going to keep these 2 around 3 minutes or so each, 3 to 4 minutes max. So presenters, again, please watch your time and we will interrupt you if you go too long. So Kareem, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Let me share my screen. I'm not sure if you guys can see it. Can you now?
Yes.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Kareem. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mendel.ai. Simply put, we're a technology company that enables you to glean and unravel knowledge from any type of clinical written knowledge, clinical written language. We basically trained the computer how to read clinical language in EMRs and in scholarly articles. And we basically convert that into an analytics-ready, search-ready format. A lot of our clients think of us as being Flatiron 3.0, which in many ways has some truth for it. Simply put, if you wanted the computer to answer a question, you basically need the data to look like that. It needs to be clean. It needs to be in a tabular format. But the reality is data looks like this in healthcare. We're still one of the very few industries that use faxes. So you get a lot of those PDFs. I believe 80 to 90% of the data is in formats that the computers cannot read. Your options today is either you just use structured data, you use claims data, the 10%, or you hire an army of human abstractors who sit down and clean the data for you, or you use an AI that basically requires your help. It's an AI that renders low quality and needs someone to prove and do a lot of QC on top of it. What we have done here at Mendel is we are the first company to build a set of AI tools that can truly help a human. It doesn't require human help. It actually helps humans to unravel, again, the unstructured data. So what we do is we're able to ingest all types of data, whether it's a doctor note, whether it's a pathology report, whether it's a fax or a scanned record. And it goes through several tools to basically de-identify it, to change all scanned records into text, and finally to do fact extraction or organize the data into a format that is readable and analyzable by the computers. One of the biggest problems that we have seen when we started the company is that the common perception is when it comes to quality, human abstraction is the standard. And you have to sacrifice speed and scale because if you want quality, humans is the way to go. AI is fast, is scalable, but it doesn't render good quality. With Mendel, that's essentially not true. This is a graph that shows an error metrics comparing our AI against, I'd say, gold standard. So we basically ingested several medical records and we compared the performance of our AI against the gold standard. And we actually scored higher than human beings in quality. And we were able to be in the upper 90s when it comes to accuracy. So that was one of the challenges that we had to fix. How can you have an AI that renders quality that a physician and a researcher can trust? The other big problem that we had to tackle was PHI. So you built this engine that is able to basically curate data and is able to mine knowledge out of it. But nobody's willing to give you data to begin with because of PHI, because of HIPAA compliance. So what we have done is we built a very interesting AI tool that can scrub any personal information from any type of record, whether it's a scanned record, doctor note, whatever it is. And we were able to get a third party to statistically verify the accuracy. So the HIPAA threshold is you need to be at least 90%, 99% accurate in scrubbing data to be qualified. We actually scored 99.8, and to our knowledge today, we are the only company that has an AI technology that was able to get a third-party statistical verification for the identification. So quality and data privacy were two main problems that we had to fix. just to put things in context, I'd like to share this case study with you. We got a client that came to us with a cervical cancer retrospective study. They had records of 50,000 patients, which translated in around 600,000 basically pages or documents. The client, because of the COVID, had to deliver the project really fast with some discount, like with some cost savings. And using their traditional methods, they estimated 27,000 hours of human abstraction. That's going to cost them in the upper hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they were only able to abstract or extract certain number of endpoints or certain number of facts. Using our system, we were able to do the whole fact extraction in 15 minutes and pretty much change the dollar sign to cents. But the interesting thing, and my background is medicine, so the interesting thing for me was the agility. The researchers in this study were able to change the endpoints 11 times in 5 days. So the ability to change and architect your experiment and be super agile, and the machine is able to deliver back as fast, allowed them to change the whole hypothesis and change the whole design of the trial. And the other interesting thing was they were able to successfully do an FDA submission, which was a great testament of the quality of our AI technology today. Again, to our knowledge, we are one of very few, if only AI company that was able to curate a data set and help a client get an FDA submission for it. When the COVID started, we found that there's tons of literature out there, and it's very hard to glean knowledge out of that literature. And we decided to take on that challenge. The company was built around oncology, and we had to scale. So we basically repurposed our technology, and we were able to build a search engine that can sit on top of most of the medical literature that exists today around COVID. It's a very advanced search engine that is able to understand context. So if you search for something like potential therapy, it is able to glean different types of therapies from that scholarly articles without having to use keyword search. Using that engine.
So Kareem, if you were to say, so basically COVID changed you guys. Basically, here you were focusing down the cancer route, and COVID basically opened up an opportunity where your technology was applied, to well beyond just cancer, and you really made a difference to a number of different studies.
Yes, and using that search engine, one of the pharma companies were able to find out that they have a calcium channel blocker, hypertension drug that actually had some antiviral effect that was proved in preclinical studies and is available in the literature. And they never heard of that experiment before.
That's great. But let's wrap it up in 10, 15 seconds. What would you say? It's all you.
I would say that COVID changed Mendel from being a vitamin to being a painkiller. Today, using our technology, we're able to render clinical data trials faster and significantly with I would say less expensive than the standards today. Every company is trying to cut costs, and we're very excited about the opportunities that are coming up to us during the COVID. Thank you.
Great.
Terrific. Thank you very much for that. So we can go ahead and stop the sharing for Mendel. So really interesting technology. Thanks, Mark, for helping to sum that up too in terms of the impact that COVID's had as well in the company. So now let's move on and let's talk a little bit about adherence and how care is happening in the home for some of these patients. So I'm going to have Corey Kidd from Digital.Health tell you his story. So Corey.
Great, thanks, Paul. Trying to share the screen here. Hopefully this will come up and I'll get started. So Digital.Health comes into play at a slightly different time in a patient's life. So we focus on building care management programs for patients who have a diagnosis and are under treatment. We do a lot of work in a couple of places, both with providers and largely with pharmaceutical companies in the specialty pharmacy space. So background is we combine a number of things here, but the core of it is really around psychology and artificial intelligence, focusing on effective patient engagement. There's a robot that's sitting behind me. I'm going to pull it out during the breakout session and let people talk to it via Zoom here. And that's our interface to patients. And there's a lot of psychology showing how, you know, unfortunately, we'd love to be all doing this meeting face-to-face instead of via Zoom, and face-to-face makes a difference. Turns out that works when we put it in a technological format as well. As a result, we build these comprehensive programs that are truly effective at engaging patients. We've seen a lot of app-based interfaces get measured in days or weeks of outcome. We are now measuring our outcomes across years with some of our patients. And there's an entire data analytics platform behind this that helps us to integrate with existing workflows and communicate to clinicians and pharmacists what's going on with their patients. So right now we're working across foremost oncology, but also in cardiology and immunology with some of the large drug makers. And a COVID-19 call out is we're actually, I think Laura referred to something very similar to this a little while ago, in talks with a manufacturer right now about moving patients from an infused therapy to an oral therapy for cancer. And we're creating the care management program around that so that we can interact with patients every day. Now, a little bit more about this particular interface. It literally is a cute little robot that goes in the patient's home, and a lot of psychology that goes into the design, as well as we brought in as a partner IDEO to do the design of the robot. Very simple from a patient perspective. Take it out of the box, plug it in, and start talking to it. And then on the back end, we're doing the data analytics. Now, a lot of times we're plugging into existing workflow systems, figuring out where that data goes, when we're delivering the right message to the right person. We've also developed dashboards in other cases. This is for one of our heart failure programs that we've deployed with patients, able to give this kind of data to the clinicians who are doing follow-up. In this case, it's typically a heart failure care manager nurse. But a lot of the work, again, is we're doing in specialty pharmacy. So going from the top right around really briefly, designing care management programs targeted towards a particular patient population. What's actually happening when we're interacting with the patient is using artificial intelligence to create a conversation that's tailored for that patient at that point in time, and understanding what's going on. So actually going through an entire conversation that might be a 2 or 3 minute check-in to, I think the longest conversation we've seen with a patient in the real world is 58 minutes. And then on the back end, doing all of the data analytics to support that. So truly a back and forth conversational interaction, integration with the pharmacy or the provider. And right now we're at the phase really of scaling this up. So we've seen significant outcomes in terms of patient engagement over time, and in the process of building this out across a number of different conditions and expanding to larger patient populations.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Corey. Great job. All right, so we're going to now move on to a totally different area. We're going to talk about detection of cancer, and especially in the early stages. So let me have Eric Fung give a presentation from Grail.
Thank you. Looking forward to being able to present to you. So I'm going to just share my screen. Hopefully this is visible. So I think you saw basically these statistics earlier, which is that early detection is really one of our best tools to improve overall survival from cancer. And this is just some statistics as they relate to all cancers. And of course, even for lung cancer, which we think of as a highly deadly disease, their survival is much better for lung cancer when it is detected, when it's localized. So we have screening paradigms for cancer. Obviously, mammography for breast cancer, lung cancer is screened for using low-dose CT, and a variety of mechanisms to screen for colorectal cancer. But single cancer screening itself has a number of challenges, most notably that there are radiation exposure. There's also false positives associated with these tests. But just as importantly, there are many other types of cancers that we just don't screen for. And in fact, the cumulative number of cancers that we don't screen for outnumber the cancers that we do screen for. And so as we think about the logical solution for that, it really is to think of a way to detect multiple cancers simultaneously. And how can we do that in a convenient manner that is relatively low usage of healthcare resources? So if we can imagine a situation where we can take a single blood draw, identify the appropriate molecular signals, and then not just detect cancer, but actually tell the physician where that cancer came from, that can lead to a very directed workup to actually identify the cancer and then take that person to the appropriate treatment paradigms. And so what we have done at GRAIL is have a large clinical development program that allows us to identify these signatures and then actually to implement them into clinical practice. So this sort of dissociated way of identifying cancer through screening multiple types of cancer can be done really in an outpatient setting. And in fact, someday in the future, it can be done by going to a blood collection center without requiring an actual visit to the clinic or to the hospital. And then what this would allow then is when the test result is provided back to the physician, the appropriate care pathways can be undertaken. So we have undertaken very large studies, and to our knowledge, we have conducted the largest clinical validation study as it relates to multi-cancer early detection. I won't go into great detail on this slide other than to say that we believe that it's very important to have a very high specificity, so we reduce the number of false positives, and that's critical because any type of screening test that is utilized introduces individuals into the healthcare system when there is a positive result. So the impact that this can have is that it will actually lead to an improvement in the overall detection of cancer. And what you can see in the red box is that by applying a blood-based multi-cancer early detection test, we can actually increase the overall number of cancers that are detected. As I indicated earlier, the way that this will improve overall healthcare outcomes is by not just detecting more cancers, but doing it at a very low false positive cost to the system. And so you can imagine that if we look at the currently screened cancers, we actually have a very large number of false positives that are detected utilizing the current standard of care screening approaches. We can actually incrementally detect 400,000 cancers using a multi-cancer blood-based test, and at the expense of actually a relatively small number of false positives, with a cumulative ability to therefore detect over 650,000 cancers. And this is in contrast to if we look at standard of care screening with only 209,000 cancers that are detected. And so the future of cancer detection is largely going to be improved using blood-based multi-cancer detection. And we can talk in our breakout section about how actually the COVID crisis has impacted the implementation and delivery of this kind of program. So that's my presentation.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. So now all of us will be placed in the 3 breakout rooms. They are automatically assigned to one of these 3 breakout rooms. And the breakout rooms would be approximately for a duration of 10 minutes, after which you would be brought back to this main session for a quick summary and a quick round of question and answers based off on today's discussion. So I'm opening up the breakout rooms right now, and you will automatically be placed in one of these rooms.
Okay, I think we're back. Hi, everyone. I hope your sessions went well. We had this sort of, Zoom doesn't allow us to sort of pick and choose, so we just broke you into 3 pieces. But we're back, and what we want to do is really summarize quickly. We're at about an hour now, so we want to just spend another few minutes. And if you've got any questions or comments out there, please post it for one of the panelists, and we'll absolutely take it on. But Laura, I'm going to turn it over to you. What did you think? Daniel basically painted, his amazing vision of the future. How does it? Was anything there that surprised you?
No, it was exciting for sure. And I think we have a lot of opportunities to do cancer care better. And I'm hopeful that maybe COVID is going to be that kind of push that we need to develop these technologies much quicker.
Yeah, no, I think that's clearly what I felt in in our panel was that it's all the need for speed, and we have no choice. Let's see, we've got a question. Andrella, we have a question out there. Why don't you jump on in?
Yes, so we have a question. What is the reimbursement strategy for some of these technologies?
Great, so these are one of the panelists. So one of you, the panelists, jump on in. Corey.
Sure, I'll start. We just talked about this. We've got two markets, one on the pharma side where the pharma companies pay for this, just like they do existing call center-based programs. And on the provider side, this is a place where there's lots of change. CMS has made a number of changes to reimbursement codes, actually starting in January of 2019, well before COVID, but then COVID has sped that up. So in terms of remote patient monitoring types of codes and the use of other telehealth codes, it's an exciting time in terms of those changes. I think it remains to be seen how many of those are going to last past the COVID-19 public health emergency, but we're pretty optimistic about it.
Laura, there is a question for you. Did COVID have any implication on research? And if so, was technology helpful in pivoting some of those?
Yeah, so it did. It actually had to stop largely because we had to limit the non-essential personnel that came on site, and that was a big disservice to our cancer patients. What we learned and what technology helped us with is that we were able to overcome our HIPAA issues and do electronic consenting, and got all of our CRCs trained on how to use telehealth. And once we were able to do that, we were able to open up our research again. So definitely learning to leverage technology better is going to help us going forward with research.
Makes sense. Daniel, I'm going to put this to you because it's, so this was probably the first time you saw Laura's presentation. What struck you as like, oh my God, I didn't realize that was also going on?
I think the big picture element is how kludgy clinical care is, and particularly cancer. It's just so complex, and it's going to be multifactorial elements. Even just yesterday, I went in Silicon Valley for a just normal standard screening stress echo, and I asked for my echo, and they gave it to me and put it on a CD-ROM, right? I don't own a CD-ROM player. And so I think a lot of it that you often quote, the future's already here, just not evenly distributed, certainly applies to cancer care and all this care. No matter, what surprises me is that some of these things aren't done, like taking wearable data and using it to look at how someone is doing, or integrating in home lab tests for white cell counts. It just seems like there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that even the best centers aren't yet utilizing. And so it's about not new technology, but aligning the incentives and payment models and getting the clinicians and nurses on board and connecting all those dots. So
that's great. Paul, what was your takeaway? I mean, you see lots of companies, you saw 3 more now, and you now had Laura's pitch. What's your takeaway after these 90 minutes? How's your point of view changed?
I'd say, it's kind of similar to Daniel. It's one of those things where you're just frustrated because we know what's out there. We know what technology is available. We know that we know what it can do, with the impact it can have, and the fact that it's not everywhere. Like, it's kind of like in the last session we had on cardiovascular. I thought the same thing when we heard the overview and we're hearing the ask in terms of what we were looking at, what the healthcare system is looking for, and we know it's there. We know these technologies are available, and yet, and clearly this hasn't trickled to the clinicians in the way that it needs to in the hospitals, and these things aren't being adopted nearly as quickly as they should be, and there's lots of reasons for that. And that's what I think we're all trying to solve, and even the series is trying to solve by, raising the awareness about a lot of the technology. But for me, it's just kind of like the excitement about what's out there and the frustration that it's not getting adopted fast enough. But the good news is, at least the silver lining to COVID is that pushing, a lot of this care out to the home and to remote monitoring is going to really accelerate things. So I'm hopeful about that. And I'm hopeful that we keep all these positive things happening with reimbursement and approval as well.
Laura, we have a few more questions for you. The first one is, what digital radiology and digital pathology AI-based technologies are you using currently?
Well, I think we're just starting on the digital pathology journey at UCSF, but it's a huge step forward being able to scan in these slides and then be able to communicate across organizations. I don't think we've gone further than that. Of course, radiology is already digital, but I think we're still at the beginning of utilizing machine learning, computer, AI technology to really leverage the data that we have.
Daniel, beyond awareness and reimbursement, what are the other barriers that you might think are to the adoption of these technologies in oncology care?
Well, like it's saying like we want to cure cancer. There's hundreds or thousands of subtypes of cancer. So I think the need is, you know, not just personalized medicine, the right immunotherapy or cocktail, but to think about the whole patient journey, which is very, you know, quite different if you're, you know, a 30-year-old with breast cancer or a 70-year-old, or you have leukemia, or you have a solid tumor. So I just think that there's a lot of design thinking elements that need to come into this to meet the patient on their age, the language, their culture. Some cultures, they don't even tell the patients traditionally that they have cancer. So I think there's a lot of other layers that need to come integrated in, and the you know, platforms like Italia can help, chatbots, avatars, and synthesizing this, not so it's overwhelming data, but useful information in context for the user is key.
There's a question for Grail. Eric, how are you approaching reimbursement for your single diagnostic test for multiple cancers?
Yeah, so since it's a single assay, we believe that it will be possible to fit this into a single diagnostic code. The bigger challenge is that the traditional paradigm for cancer screening reimbursement has required a national coverage decision and therefore USPSTF guidelines, which has a fairly, we'll say, a lengthy process of data generation and review. So I think the challenge is less about single versus multiple and the clinical utility evidence that an organization like USPSTF will require.
That's great.
Laura, one last question. What do you feel about companies empowering patients to access their cancer data and to share it across different providers across systems?
I think that's the only way that we're going to actually move forward. I think we're going to have to be cognizant of protecting that information, but also being able to share it in order to leverage the community, right? There's across the country, there's so much knowledge, and I think that we need to leverage that. And patients are mobile now, they go cross country. We have to be able to have access to the data and that knowledge.
That's great. Well, with that, I always promise everyone that we end on time, and it's our time. So first of all, on behalf of UCSF and UCSF Health Hub, Med Tech Innovator, and Daniel, and the great companies, and Laura, you were absolutely fantastic, and you were invited back 500 times more. We really thank you everyone for attending. This will all be recorded, and so if you want to share this with friends, please do. We've got 2 more of these coming up before we're all focused on our award show for the rest of the summer and the fall. And everyone have as good a time as you can up until into July 4th, and we'll see you in a few weeks. And thanks again.
Thank you.
See everybody. Go join those Zooms. They're in the link. If you look in the chat, they're the Zooms for each of the companies. So they'll be available now if you want to go spend some more time with each of the presenters today. Thanks, everyone.
Great.
Thank you.